And we're recording. Welcome to the Expert Speaker Podcast. We have Parrish Wilson, writing therapy experts. Welcome to the podcast, Parrish.
Thank you.
And have you published a book on writing therapy as well?
I am in the process of writing that book right now.
How
Yeah,
exciting. How
it's
exciting.
very exciting.
Okay, what is writing therapy?
What is writing therapy? Well, I will start by saying writing therapy is a lot of things and can look different to lots of people. But what I've really honed in on is how to create sort of in the experience of a 45-minute lunch and learn or a 90-minute extended workshop, how to take people through the process of getting getting what's stuck inside them onto the page. And we know, like the research is extensive. We know that when we take these things that kind of burden us in our mind and we give them space on the page, then we have a measurable cathartic release. We have a measurable improvement in our mental and emotional well-being, as well as a measurable improvement in our physical well-being. Like it shows physical stress symptoms decrease through this process. So it's very there's a lot going on. But that's the heart of it, right? We get what is plaguing us out of us and onto the page, and that gives us this relief that we can feel. Yeah.
Wow, great. So it helps us get stuff out of us onto the page, this stuff that is stuck, that's plaguing us. We have a cathartic experience and a measurable improvement in physical and mental health markers.
Yeah.
Sounds a little uncomfortable, sounds a little vulnerable. I'm a macho man. You don't see me crying often, but I will tell you, there was one time I was going through it. You might say I was heartbroken.
Hmm.
It was a great challenge of my life, and a very wise friend of mine called M. Shannon Hernandez gave me, of all things, a writing activity.
Hmm.
And she said, write a letter to her, because she knew this is about a woman.
Yeah.
And I wrote this letter, and she said, write a letter to her saying everything you want to say, everything you need to say, but don't send it.
Hmm.
I said, okay, what's the point? Writing a letter that won't be sent. And then she said, write her response to you. Everything you want her to say, everything you want to hear. And oh my God, you say cathartic experience. I had a mountain of tissues by the
Yeah.
time I was done with that second letter, and I felt measurably lighter indeed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And letter writing is a form of writing therapy that it's quite common and is probably one of the more commonly suggested ones. Like if you're going to get a suggestion from a therapist or something, they often do that. And it is key to not send that letter, right? To write a letter that is fully expressive of everything you want to say because you know that it's safe and it's not going anywhere. And that touches on sort of where you started in that is that like some of this process is really vulnerable, right? And it can be really difficult. It can be difficult for us to recognize our feelings, let alone name them and express them. But when we do it on the page instead of out loud, there is a little bit more safety there, right? Nobody needs to see that. People can even sometimes do that writing like on a document on their computer and then they can delete it, right? And it can be just entirely gone because the therapeutic component is not in where those words end up, but just in the getting them out of us, as you experienced with your pile of tissues that accompanied
Yes.
your letter writing.
Yes. Parrish, I know that smart businesses and organizations are using writing therapy, and you've been doing writing therapy workshops. And I'm trying to picture this. Is this, excuse me, in person where everyone's coming in to a room with like a journal and a box of tissues, and 90 minutes later, they're feeling lighter, or is this something people are doing from the comfort of their own desk over a Zoom? Can you kind of walk me through what is a writing therapy workshop that you've been using in companies?
Yeah, and so it can be either. It can be in person or it can be on Zoom. But I find that they really are ideal on Zoom because it allows, again, a little bit more safety there, right? If somebody does start to get tearful, they can turn their camera off. They can have their own little moment, you know. Maybe they're sitting in their favorite chair, or they've got their favorite mug with a cup of tea, and so there's a couple of points of just sort of safety and security there for them. So generally, I do these online. They are beautiful in person. It's a different experience, and you really have to, um, make sure that that space is safe as well. But it's great for organizations because we can do like a lunch and learn where people jump on for 45 minutes. And in those workshops, we're generally looking at things like values, your sense of fulfillment at work, why did you get into that job? What puts a smile on your face during the week? What are those things that are keeping you there? How are you making a difference? And then in an in-person workshop, we're going to touch on those things too, but we might go a little bit deeper. We might go a little bit longer, depending on what the time is. But all of the workshops that are targeted towards organizations, I'm very thoughtful to not lead anybody somewhere that they can't come back from. At the end of the day, I'm an ethical mental health worker and I need to make sure everybody is safe in that space, right? So a group that's working with me on an extended basis, we're going to be looking at some different topics and going a little bit deeper than somebody who's a group that's working with me just once on a 45-minute basis, right? That's when we're really going to stay at that value level and that, reigniting sort of the passion for their work and making sure everybody ends that 45 minutes ready to go back to work inspired and re-engaged.
That's a really great point. I can see how, if not properly managed or not properly facilitated, how someone can kind of get emotionally stuck in
Hmm.
something that makes them less productive for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So fascinating. You can accomplish a lot in 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Getting something therapeutic that kind of helps you move forward in a certain area and feeling inspired coming back to work. I love doing values exercise. I've done so many leadership training,
Hmm.
and what I find is that when people re-engage with their own values, they start to be able to make decisions faster, which ultimately is a key productivity factor. And one of the things that people really struggle with are decisions that they don't know how to make. Once they
Yeah.
reconnect with their values, they just go, what do my values lean me towards?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about the challenge that organizations are facing with their people. We call it overwhelm, we call it burnout, and with so many challenges, so many things moving so quickly today, existential threats on the horizon. I would say I would not be surprised if overwhelm and burnout were at an all-time high.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what are some other approaches companies take to burnout and overwhelm that are maybe more expensive or less effective? And what are your kind of your thoughts on overwhelm, burnout, and different ways of solving it, since you are one of the solution providers of the overwhelm and burnout problem?
Yeah, well, the sort of worst case scenario that we see for overwhelm and burnout is that it leads to disability claims, short-term and
Mm.
long-term disability claims and actual departure from the work environment. And that's extremely costly to any organization. And it's costly to the person as well, right? When things get so difficult that we have to step away from something that might have once been a place of fulfillment, that that kind of weights on us heavier and heavier. We actually have the we have Mental Health Week for Canada coming up at early May, and its theme this year is unmasking mental health. And just, starting that conversation of how important it is for us to talk about these things, including in the workplace, as one of the means of prevention. So, I've worked with clients for, well, a couple of decades now. And what we see is just even that fear of judgment, that concern about talking to their manager about this, that exacerbates their symptoms even more so. Right now, we have anxiety coming into play, we have shame coming into play.
Yeah.
So, creating a space where we have these conversations where people know people know that the leaders care, and that's why I find it in my workshops we do touch on these topics of mental health again in a very safe and careful way, but we're creating a space where we say like, hey, this conversation is allowed to happen. We are creating spaces for it. Leaders, when they choose to bring me in, they're choosing to bring in and introduce a healthy coping skill for their employers. Like, we're going to have an experience in the workshop time, and that's going to be powerful and it's going to be therapeutic, and they're going to walk away feeling better. But they also have now introduced an idea of like, hey, I could go home and I could journal as well. Hey, next time I get really frustrated after a meeting, I could do that practice that Parrish offered, and that can shift my mood. And it's a tool that continues to get used throughout their day, throughout their week, both in career and life. So it's really working on this. It's not just a one and done. Okay, we're going to recognize that, people struggle and we're going to talk about it once and then put it back in the box and put it away. But really opening up that conversation, showing showing teams that it matters, that how they feel matters. It matters to the leaders, and hopefully not only for the bottom line, right? Like the bottom line matters, productivity, profit, those all matter. But I do think we're also getting to a point in our society where we actually do care about people as well. And we want them to do better, not just for how it benefits us, but we understand that that ripples out into their lives, into communities, and across the organization in that way.
Hmm. Hmm. So understanding mental health of the people around us, particularly with work-related burnout, overwhelm, people really care and they really want their people to be better, not just because it's more productive or to avoid a disability claim, but because people really care.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, people do. They do care. And then when you care, your staff feel that, right? And they
Yeah.
feel far more dedication, far greater sense of, again, this word fulfillment that I say often, but it's such a key word. We know that a sense of fulfillment and purpose is one of the biggest indicators of living a happy life. It's one of the greatest ways we can have resilience to the challenges that face us, is that we feel like we get up and we do something meaningful that day, and we can make and maintain that as part of corporate culture.
Hmm. Hmm. Tell us about your book.
Tell you about my book. Well, my book feels like it's a long time coming, and took a lot of I don't know, steps, I guess, to get here. So a few years ago when I did my master's in counseling and spirituality, my master's research focused on healing trauma through autobiographical writing. So that's sort of that deep side work of writing therapy. But in that process, I'm a geek at heart, and I love academic writing, both reading it and writing it. So it was really incredible to pour into all the research. I had been running these workshops already for probably about 7 years at that point. They had really developed based on my own writing experience and feedback of clients, and had been a really organic development of the workshop. And then I got to go and do all this research and basically prove what I had been doing in the workshops. So the book takes that out of boring academic jargon and into what I hope is compelling writing and looks at some of these specific ways that writing helps us. So it gives us that cathartic release. It helps us understand what's going on, which might have also been part of what you were experiencing in that letter writing as well as some
Hmm.
sort of like really being able to um, when it just sits in our head, it can be really muddled, right, and confusing. And as we put it onto the page, it becomes more clear. And so
Mm.
that's one of the key ways that writing can help us and that it can help us at work, right? If we're in a situation or a struggle and we're starting to ruminate, when we get it written down, it becomes much more clear and understandable. So that catharsis, that understanding, that taking, there's a taking power that we get when we write our story, particularly those folks that choose to write memoir style stories, often about difficult things that have happened to them. And there's a real taking back of power in those situations. And the sense of connection when we share our writing with others, when we do choose to do that, that can be incredibly powerful and therapeutic, and often is what can lead to some of our most powerful movements in society as well. And creating change in the world comes from, people writing and having their voices heard and recognizing that other people believe what they believe as well and moving forward in that sense. And then sort of my final, really one of my favorite ways that writing is therapeutic, and I aspire to create this for people, is that sense of flow. And we know from a positive psychology sense all the way to a spiritual sense that our experience of flow is a really powerful and healing practice for any of us. And people find flow in other ways too. Athletes find flow. That's often our most commonly thought of sense of flow is in a real professional athlete when you see them in the zone. But we can do that through creativity. We can do that really anywhere in our life if we choose to be present enough. But writing is really powerful that. And I have a practice that I take people through specifically to engage that sense of flow more often or a little bit easier. So the book basically compiles my biggest uh, ideas around writing, combining both the research and this sort of 10 or so years now that I have running these writing workshops and seeing what, like, sometimes I think it's kind of funny. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know, I just gave you folks some prompts and now you're transformed. And I've always said it's like it's the writing who does it. I create the space and yeah, I spend a lot of time with my thoughts and my heart in this writing space, but it's the writing that does the magic far more than me. So,
I love that. I know how it is to have a great pen and a great journal and not write at all because
mhm,
we don't make the time or we don't know how to use the thing. And I've been introduced to some very powerful journaling exercises through paid facilitation. I'm paying for what I'm paying for is a solution to one of my many problems.
mhm,
And I'm delighted to know that the answer can be with a pen and a paper and some time and a good direction.
yeah.
It's one of the tools that I go to change my states. If I'm in a state that's not great for me, I have an exercise where I write down a thought that I'm having, and then I write down the next best thought and the next best
Mhm.
thought after that, something that's associated, but just a little bit better and a little bit better. And before about six, seven, eight, I'm in a much higher frequency and I'm
Yeah,
there, right?
yeah.
And I think of the point where the ink touches the paper is like the point of creation.
Mhm.
This is where the idea is. This is where the creation, everything that's behind it is like the record, it's the past, but you're creating at the point. Oh, and there was another thing I wanted to tell you. I learned this term from David Allen, author of Getting Things Done, which is a whole productivity system of writing things down and organizing them so that you remember what you want to remember when you need to remember, and you don't have to remember everything else,
Mhm. Yay.
which is a good way of clearing the mind. And there's a fancy word called distributed cognition. And he says that's the fancy scientific term for writing things down, which is he's
I like
saying
it.
the thoughts that are going in the head. I need to do this. I need to go there. I need to pick this up. Oh, don't forget to get that, transfer that over there. When those start floating around, it's bothersome or can be. But when they're captured,
Yeah.
uh, that's the distributed cognition.
Yeah. Yeah. And just how it can be a really simple practice in that way, right? That we can take
Hmm.
this really, really busy brain and we can give it somewhere else to live so it doesn't need to occupy our mind so much. Yeah. And that's what when we also move into the deeper therapeutic sense, one of the experiences that many people have is like when they're in talk therapy, yeah, talk therapy is helpful, um, but it's not so concrete. You kind of say something and then it's just out there and it floats away. But when
Exactly.
you're in writing therapy and you write it down, it's far more that release is stronger because it's actually living somewhere else now rather than just kind of being around you.
Hmm.
Um, and so a lot of people feel that it was it's only once they write down the toughest stuff that they can actually feel a relief from that rather than just saying it. Yeah.
So simple.
Yeah, it is. It
So,
is.
Parrish, I know you work with people one-on-one. So, if
Yep.
someone's interested in a one-on-one with Parrish, get a hold of her. I know you do public workshops where like people can sign up. They don't have to be part of an organization. And
Yep.
then you also do special in-organization, in-house workshops for companies and groups. How would people get a hold of you if they're interested in having writing therapy experience with you?
Yeah, for sure. So they can look me up. I'm on LinkedIn under Parrish Wilson, Parrish, Wilson. And I also have for folks who want to give it a little bit of a try, I have a very short and just to prove how quickly it can feel good, I have a very short 15-minute workshop that's available on my website. So for that, it's parrishwilson.com/the power of writing, all one word. And that's it's I impressed myself that day in fitting it all into 15 minutes, and it's been such a cool little mini workshop to be able to share with people and show them how quickly and it can happen and how good it can feel. So those are definitely the best ways to get in touch with me, either my website or LinkedIn, and it's all under Parrish Wilson.
All right, you got it. Thank you so much, Parrish. Thank you for sharing about writing therapy, overcoming and preventing overwhelm and burnout. Thank you, Parrish.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.